Emily from the Economics Tutoring Center, and today we're going to do some problems on calculating GDP. Just so you know, different teachers use different notation, so be sure to check with your professor before you use or implement any of these exact methods. Alright, so for our first GD problem, we're going to do this. Assume a family of 4 decides to start eating at a local restaurant rather than purchasing food to cook at home. What can we predict will happen to GDP? So essentially, the question is asking us how our calculation for GDP would differ in scenario 1, when we were eating at a local restaurant, and scenario 2, when we're purchasing food to cook at home. There's 3 different ways to calculate GDP. The first 2 methods are the most common. That's the income approach and the expenditure approach. So in this scenario, we've noticed that we're purchasing food to cook at home, or that we're purchasing food from a local restaurant. So when I look at this problem, I'm thinking, oh, consumption, we're buying something. And so I would move to the expenditure approach. With this approach, we're going to use the equation for GDP, which is equal to our total consumption, C, plus our total investment, I, plus government spending, G, plus our net exports, which I'm just going to label as X. So X represents the net exports. All right, and so we already stated that this was going to be a consumption question, so I'm going to go ahead and focus on the C variable in this equation. All right, so their original scenario in which they were purchasing food to cook at home. Well, how is this incorporated into our equation for GDP? Well, when we purchase food to cook at home, we are increasing our consumption by buying groceries from the store. All right, but what's happening in this equation? It says that they decide to start eating at a local restaurant rather than purchasing food at home. So if they are no longer increasing their consumption of groceries, if they're no longer purchasing food to cook at home, then the opposite of this is happening. Instead of increasing our consumption on groceries, we're decreasing our consumption because no longer are they buying groceries, they're doing something else. So if they're not buying groceries, what are they doing? Well, we already stated that they start eating at a local restaurant. So in this situation, we've increased our consumption at the restaurant. We had a decrease in consumption because we stopped buying groceries, and then we had an increase in consumption because we started buying food at a restaurant. So what happens overall? Well, the most important thing to realize is that at a restaurant, you're receiving 2 things. You're receiving the good, your food, and you're receiving the service that this restaurant is making and prepping your food. And so we would assume that at the restaurant, you're paying a greater value than you would if you just went out and bought groceries, because the restaurant is not only charging you for the price of the food that they're creating, but also the cost that it requires them to make that food. So we would assume that this increase in consumption from the restaurant would be greater than the decrease in consumption from the groceries. And so overall, our GDP is increasing. And if we wanted to be a little bit more specific, it's increasing by the value added of the restaurant's prep and service, since they also have to buy the groceries. So increase in GDP by the prep and service value. And that's it for this question. And that's all for today. If you need any more help, feel free to come to the Economics Tutoring Center on the 2nd floor of the BA building. I hope this was very helpful. Bye.
That's good.